Ladies and gentlemen, let us now invite Her Excellency Orla Tunney, Ambassador of Ireland to Malaysia, to deliver her special address.
Thank you very much. Am I close enough to the microphone? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I would claim to have a wealth of experience in sustainability, but I do have some experience in multilateralism and in the agreement between countries of global standards, and the area of ESG is certainly a very good example of that. So, academic friends, Madam Malaysian thought leaders, industry representatives, journalists, others, ladies and gentlemen, friends, thank you for being here this morning. You may ask yourself, what does an ambassador have to say about ESG? And surely that's a matter for corporations. But I would say to you that what an ambassador can do, aside from standing here and talking to you for a few moments, is to facilitate awareness raising, highlighting examples of best practice, and facilitating connections, in this case between Ireland and Malaysia, but connections in general, to allow Malaysia to capture the undoubted opportunities which are presented at this moment in time in the whole world of ESG. And I just want to take a few minutes of your time to give you a little bit of the Irish perspective to help illuminate why we feel that this is a moment of great opportunity for Malaysia, and to congratulate you on having this conference and for being at the forefront in Southeast Asia on such an important issue, as you are also in the chairmanship of ASEAN, and so recently hosted that wonderful summit. We were all afraid that all it would be was traffic disruption, and then we saw the Malaysia machine spring into action, how everything was so well organised, and a very substantial statement. You know, it's time for Malaysia really to step into the power which you have, and maybe sometimes you don't realise how well regarded you are around the world as a regional leader. And I know there's some people in the room for Singapore. Forget about Singapore for a moment. You know, this is a moment for Malaysia to assume leadership in this area. And I congratulate you for being here today. And I do see some empty chairs. I'm sorry for those people that they're not here, because they're missing out, because this is a moment where, by acquainting yourself with the frameworks which exist, which are new and challenging, you can seize an advantage for yourself and you can respond quickly and effectively. Today's event, in short, is very important. And I'm proud to say that it was the Irish our permanent representative to the UN at the time, with his Kenyan colleague, who co-facilitated the discussions back in 2014, 2015, which led to the agreement of the Sustainable Development Goals. But that work was largely done by the countries of the Global South, who agreed the goals and the objectives. And they are standards which have, you know, it was a massively complex challenge to get 193 countries to agree. But those standards have been agreed by everybody. It's now, of course, a national matter on how they will be implemented and measured and so on. But the global standard is there. And this is why, as a small representative of a small country like Ireland, I'm such a fan of multilateralism, because at the moment we see in the world a bit of a return to what we sometimes call might is right. You know, the strongest think that they can impose their will on everybody else. That's not good for small countries like Ireland or medium countries like Malaysia. What's good for the greatest number is to have clear and agreed rules that everybody will live by. So even though the UN has its flaws, I would say that the agreement of the SDGs and other multilateral agreements on standards are the friend of small and medium-sized countries, because it's clear what the expectations are, and it is clear what is necessary to thrive and to capitalise on opportunities. And there won't be an arbitrary last-minute change of the SDGs. No one person can come along and say, well, I've decided these aren't the SDGs anymore. It's clear. And I think if Ireland is anything in the world, it's a bit of a poster child for the benefit of rules. You know, Ireland's history is as a peripheral, windswept and rain-soaked island on the edge of an ocean, which was colonised by a much more powerful neighbour, and which for a very long time was a location for great natural beauty, but not much else, no industry, a great deal of poverty. Quite a unique experience for a Western nation, for a European nation, to have been colonized, to have been so poor, and to have been, 200 years ago, which sounds like a long time, but my grandmother knew people who lived through the Irish famine 200 years ago, and it's still very much in our national psyche that, and I think this helps us to identify with the countries of the Global South, that we have been through many of the experiences that countries of the Global South unfortunately are still grappling with today. And that's also why my colleague David Donoghue, I think, was able to secure the trust of his partners in the UN, because, as you know, we are a Western country, but perhaps not a typical one. And because of our relatively isolated position, unlike Malaysia, which has the geographical advantage of being at the centre of everything, the most important shipping lanes in the world, Ireland is on the periphery, on an island off an island. How are we going to thrive and survive? Well, our economy has grown to be a knowledge-based economy. We don't have natural resources, but what we have is our people. We have enormous strengths in education. We have most of our exports to Malaysia are in the services area. We have companies like today, Intuition, who are in the knowledge economy. And that is where we have thrived. We are huge in financial services and in healthcare and pharmaceuticals as well. We're not a heavy industry country. But why we have really thrived is by our membership of the European Union, where we again have benefited by setting. The European Union is, I suppose, a rule-setting body, and people may have their views about the European Union, but certainly for us being inside it, we have benefited enormously from suddenly being a small cold island on the edge to then being part of an enormous single market, and our companies have been able to grow by having access to that huge single market, so that we now have world-leading companies starting on our small, cold, remote island to progress from being a poor and irrelevant country famous for our scenery and our music to now being, quite an important economy. And this year to have had the honour of being invited by the South African chair of the G20 to participate in meetings of the G20, and that as a guest. And that is also in part to our long tradition of development assistance, which also touches on the subject of ESG, because somebody asked me, what's Ireland doing to promote ESG, the ESG agenda around the world, and a lot of what we're doing in that is within our development aid programme, to ensure, economic growth is important, and those of you here who work for corporates and want to make profit, that's all great. But we also think about who is benefiting from the economic growth, how equitable is the access to the opportunity. And when in our development programme, we're always looking at those who are furthest behind, how can they participate in the economic growth and how can they benefit? And this is not just because we're wonderful people and we care, although we do. It's also because we know, and I certainly know as a practitioner in the area of international relations, what inequality leads to. And we look at the challenges that the world is facing today, political upheaval, and a lot of the challenges that the world is facing today is due to inequality of access to opportunity. So again, I think we are at a crossroads here where we either seize the opportunity to have access for all to the economic possibilities that are there, or we allow ourselves to be steamrolled by larger entities who want to keep everything for themselves. And as small and medium countries, we really need to step up and to assert ourselves and to make sure that we are part of the growth which will flow from this movement towards new standards in ESG. And I mentioned the EU, and Malaysia is in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with the EU, and I want to plug that because, the West is not just the United States, and I know there's a great deal of uncertainty around the United States, which is an important trade and investment partner for everybody, including Ireland. But just to say to you, that Europe is also, the EU countries are also really important trading partners for Malaysia, and they are watching what's happening here on ESG. Because when companies want to establish their Southeast Asia base, and they're looking at Malaysia, as many of them are. Many Irish companies are here, and other European companies. They're not just looking at tax advantages or the great infrastructure or the trained workforce, all the advantages that you have. They look at that, but they're also increasingly looking at the ESG environment, because they have to report on their performance globally. And if they situate themselves in a country which makes it difficult for them to comply, that's a problem for them, and they look elsewhere. So I really appeal to you not just to embrace ESG because ethically it's the right thing to do, but there is an economic advantage there, and it really is being watched internationally, and investors are looking at that increasingly as part of the appeal of a location in which to invest. So be in no doubt that the world is watching what Malaysia is doing. And again, I congratulate the academic partners here for your vision in having this conference. It's a very, very welcome event indeed, and I know that a lot will come from it, and I look forward to listening what everybody else has to say. I had various other notes here, but I think I'll spare you those. I just wanted to really say to you, thank you for being here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity as not a specific expert in this field, but somebody who's very committed to it, to speak to you, to say Ireland is here as a partner. Intuition obviously are here, and I thank them for having me. Because Ireland, because of our political and geographical situation, we're nimble, we're adaptable. To get ahead, our companies have had to be very responsive, to be very clued in on what's happening, and to jump on those opportunities. And we're good at that, and we're willing to share our expertise. We're keen to share our expertise in Malaysia, because it's very, very important that small and medium countries hold their place in the centre and capitalise on the opportunities that face us today. Of course there are challenges, but there are opportunities. Please focus on those, and let's work together to make this a positive impact for the people of Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency, for sharing some valuable background on the ESG environment in Ireland and the world.